What is up, you guys? Ryan Brewer back here, the host of Michael Myers Reacts, and today I am here to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge from 1985. Now, I'm pretty excited about this one, as most of you probably already know. I have done a podcast over the original Nightmare on Elm Street film, so of course I'm going to continue the Nightmare franchise with Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Now, obviously this is kind of like a podcast series like I'm doing with Halloween. I'm talking about every single Halloween movie. I plan on doing that for, obviously, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I say obviously way too much. I gotta calm down with the obviously. So of course I'm here to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Honestly, I do think this is a underrated sequel. That's what this episode is going to be about, and I just wanted to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 because I feel like this movie doesn't get talked about enough. So the first thing I want to talk about is why people don't like A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, and I think it's because this one is really different than the rest of the films in the franchise, and you can also argue that people don't like the gay tone of this movie, I guess you can say. I don't know if that's the right word for it. It definitely feels different than the other Nightmare films. This one, it stands out, and I think that's why some people don't like it, is because it's way different than the other films. It does kind of feel like the original when it comes to, the story being really dark and Freddy himself being really sinister in this movie, but overall, the film feels very different. And I'm sure most of you know what I mean when I say this movie kind of has a gay tone to it. You all know what I'm talking about if you've seen A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I don't think that takes away from the movie. Some people might not like that. I don't know. But this film just isn't talked about enough because I watched Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge 2 or 3 nights ago. It wasn't that long ago, and I just really love the sequel. I think this is a very strong follow-up to Wes Craven's classic. Now, obviously, if Wes Craven filmed A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, it would have been something completely different, probably even better than what we got, but what we got, I'm really not mad about. With that being said, I'm not mad at Jack Shoulder's directing. I don't think he's a bad director. He's not as good as Jack Nee. Jack Nee. Okay, that was a lame joke and I know it, but Jack Shoulder is not a bad director. I do like his style. I think he kind of somewhat captured Wes Craven's style, because when you watch A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, it does feel like the original movie. It has that feel of the original movie when it comes to a dark story, Freddy being sinister, but it does feel different at the same time. This is the black sheep of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, just like Friday the 13th Part 5 is for Friday the 13th, and just like, which one? Halloween 3 for the Halloween franchise. I couldn't think for a second, but those are the black sheeps of those big 3 franchises. And that's why I love A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. I love it because it is the black sheep of the franchise. It's not like the other films because, once you get to A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 and then you watch Part 4, those have similar feels. They have characters that continue on. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 basically isn't acknowledged in the franchise after the movie is done. I mean, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 could arguably be the direct sequel to the original movie, and I know there's a lot of people out there who watch the original Nightmare movie and then they immediately watch 3 and they skip Part 2, and to me that's just wrong. And honestly, Robert Englund's performance in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is definitely one of my favorites. It's my 3rd favorite performance by him because he's so sinister, he's so evil like he is in the first movie, and the makeup on Freddy, the way that Freddy looks in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is magnificent. Kevin Yeager killed it with the makeup effects for Freddy, and I love the look, I love the performance, and this is just such an underrated sequel. It's like it gets looked over, and this movie doesn't deserve to get looked over, so don't sleep on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. If you guys don't watch it, or you haven't seen it in a long time, give the movie a watch, because don't sleep on Nightmare Part 2. And since I'm talking about Robert Englund's performance in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, let's talk about that pool scene where Freddy attacks Lisa, which is Jesse's girlfriend in the movie, of course. That whole scene where he attacks her and it leads into the pool scene, that pool scene is like top 3 in the franchise. Top 3 best scenes, or best scene in the entire Nightmare franchise. I love the pool scene. The way Freddy looks there, the lines he gives, the chaos that happens in that scene is just incredible. And not only is Robert Englund's performance really good in this movie, pretty much everybody's performance is really good in this movie. The dude who played Grady was fantastic. Mark Patton as Jesse is amazing. He's a scream queen, a scream king, whatever you want to call him. He's fantastic in the movie. He's very good in the movie. Just everybody's great in the movie. I don't have any problems with the cast. And that's another thing that really makes this movie very good. And Kim Myers as Lisa, our supporting lady in this movie, if you will. And we even have, what's his name? Bert from Return of the Living Dead as Jesse's dad. I can't remember his real name, but just an incredible cast. And A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 has one of the most iconic openings in the entire franchise, and that's the school bus scene, or the school bus nightmare, if you will, Jesse's nightmare. That's iconic. That's great. I mean, that's probably, honestly, my second favorite opening in the entire franchise. It's really, really good. But the point of this podcast is don't sleep on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. I definitely think it's an underrated sequel. I do realize that, it is the black sheep of the franchise. It does have its own feel, but that's what makes the movie so great, So if you're not a fan of the movie or you haven't seen it in a really long time, go back and rewatch it. Give it another shot. If you've only seen it once, you definitely got to watch it again, because A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I just think it gets looked over, and it's really unfortunate because it's a movie that doesn't deserve to get looked over. It's really, really good. But yeah, that's the podcast on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. I really don't have anything else to say about it. Let me know what you guys think of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 in the comment section down below. If you guys did enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe. That would be much appreciated. And I will see you guys on the next video.